It's autumn, 2002, and Helen Ballard has come up to the King Valley for the weekend. Her place in Chestnut, on Upper King River Road, is a holiday house now. She bought it in 1998 and lived there for a year. And during that time she became good friends with a woman on the farm next door. Their kids played together, and some Sundays the two of them would take the children to church. And recently she's learnt that a few weeks ago, that friend, Kath, had tried to end her own life. And so on the Saturday of her visit, Helen walks down the road to see her. She stays for hours. They talk the way friends who have not seen each other in a while talk. Around things, and then eventually into them. And somewhere during their second cuppa, Kath says the only way to make her life better is to leave her husband, leave this farm, and to move into Wangaratta. Helen encourages this. She tells her that she should, that she'd get half the farm and be well set for a brighter, different future. And that's when Kath starts to cry. She goes very quiet and also seems nervous. She keeps looking out the kitchen window, checking, making sure that her husband is not close enough to hear what she's saying. Noticing this anxiety, Helen leans in and drops her voice to a whisper and asks her straight out, "Has he bashed you?" Kath shakes her head. No, but she also motions toward the door. The two of them stand up, get out of the house, and start to walk down the road, out into open country, with nothing and nobody in it. And it is only there that Kath feels safe enough to truly open up to her friend. "I know I'd get half the farm," she says, "if I left John. But he's told me I would be leaving the farm in a box before that happened." Helen recalls that this is said seriously, not for dramatics. She's crying while she says it. And so Helen Ballard gives her the key to the holiday house. "Just in case," she says, and gives her friend a hug. And after that afternoon, she never sees Kath again. I'm your storyteller, Mark. Welcome back to Struth. This is a two-part episode, a request from Annette and plenty of others, I might add, from the Wangaratta region. It's become quite clear to me that this is a story that those in Kath's community desperately want to be told. They don't want this to become a cold case without any justice, and that's exactly why I'm covering it this week. So thanks again, Annette, and for everyone who's reached out asking me to tell Kath's story. And a content warning on this one, it deals with a range of different topics. Domestic abuse, coercion, stalking, attempted suicide, and eventually the disappearance, suspected murder of a woman. And so if that's not for you, I totally understand. I also want to add that there is a document at the centre of this case. It's the finding of a Victorian coroner named Peter White, and it was handed down on the 4th of June 2008 after an inquest that ran 10 days at Wangaratta and then went back to Melbourne twice more. And it is that document upon which I'm basing this case, not local rumour and gossip, the finds of a coroner. This is part 1. It's called Half the Farm. If you head south out of Wangaratta, the country changes, and somehow you change with it. For the first while, it's the flat, ordered farmland of northeast Victoria, and then the road picks up the King River and starts to follow it, winding, bending, and the valley begins to close in. Oxley, Millawa, Whitfield, Cheshunt. The hills come up on both sides and the properties get further apart and the bitumen narrows. And by the time you're that far up, there's one road in and the same road out. There's beautiful country, especially in autumn as the trees begin to turn. Tobacco country back in the day. Wine country now. Cool climate Italian varieties like Prosecco, I'm told. And in the heart of this majestic scenery sits Kath's former farm. It's 60 kilometres from a set of traffic lights. It's exactly the type of location that can provide a person with a sense of freedom or an overwhelming sense of isolation. Your nearest neighbours are 20 minutes away down a dirt track, and in a valley like that one, the people on the properties either side of you are not like town neighbours. They are the men your husband hunts with. They're the families your kids grew up alongside. They're his mates, more often than not. And they were his mates before you got there. And that is exactly the country Kath Bergamin moved into when she was just 18 years old. She was born in Melbourne, December 64, and adopted at 6 weeks by Kenneth and Kathleen Russell. She was one of 7 children born to a woman named Janet Felici, and 5 of those 7 were adopted out. It's important to note that nobody told Kath any of this until she was about 23, and when she found out, she didn't sulk about it. She went looking, and she found her birth family. She held on to them, and she was still in touch with them the week that she disappeared. And that'll matter later, in a small and very telling way. She grew up behind post office counters because that's what her parents did. Blackburn North first, and then out between Stalls and Arnott, and then on to Moyu. She went to secondary school in Wangaratta and got to year 11. Kath was just 16 when she met John Bergamin at a local dance, 17 when she fell pregnant, and they married at Moyu in March 1983, and she moved into a cottage on his family's tobacco farm on Upper King River Road. Their eldest, Stephen, was born the following month. Renee came in 1987 and Dylan in 1990. And when John's father died, the two of them took over running that place. And it was her life for 19 years. The farm, the kids, the valley, and the one road in and out. We have 2 versions of what that life was like for Kath. And the first version that I'm going to share with you comes from her friends. Carol and Grady had known her since they were kids together at Moyu, and she's about as close to Kath as anybody gets. She moved away to Adelaide in 1991, but they stayed close. Phone calls, visits, staying over at the farm once or twice a year. And Carolyn's evidence is that John could lose his temper over almost nothing. She was there, present one evening when he came in for his dinner, and it was not what he wanted. And he swore at Kath about it, and Kath fed the plate to the dogs and went back to the kitchen and started cooking all over again. Her evidence is also that he did not want Kath having friends, or working, or studying. That enrolling in a TAFE course over at Wodonga at 40-odd years of age took her far more courage than it should take anybody. Another close friend, Sandy Riley, also gave evidence about the relationship. Sandy met Kath at a wedding in 1998 and saw her a couple of times a week after that. Her evidence is that John worked hard on the farm, nobody disputes that, but that he did not want much to do with Kath or the children. He never thanked her for anything, not the farm work, not the cooking, none of it. It was more of an expectation. And so that's one version. And version 2 comes from inside the household. John Bergamin, in a statement to police, says the marriage was very happy. His account is that Kath's troubles only started when she found out she was adopted, and that she was not the same person afterwards. Stephen, the eldest child, says the family was always stable and solid. A normal family, in his words. He says his mother and father never fought, physically or verbally, that they never disagreed about anything. An important thing to note at this point. At the inquest, John Bergamin and Stephen Bergamin both applied to be excused from giving evidence, on the grounds that answering questions might tend to incriminate them. That is a right they have. It's a serious right and it exists for good reasons, and the coroner granted it. But the consequence of that decision is this. Their statements went into the record, but no barrister ever got to stand up and test a word of them. Nobody had the opportunity to ask either John or Stephen a second question under oath. What nobody argues about is that in the mid-90s, Kath Bergamin was in and out of the psychiatric ward at Wangaratta Base Hospital. There were 3 admissions in total across 1995 and 1996. The first one was involuntary. She was given a diagnosis of bipolar disorder that a psychiatrist would later look at and openly doubt. She also had rheumatoid arthritis all through her body, and it was getting worse. And by the last year of her life, the arthritis was bad enough that she was on anti-inflammatories every day just to get through. And so by 2002, that's where Kath's life had led her. 60 kilometres of valley between her and the nearest traffic light. 3 kids, a farm to run, a body that hurt her every day, and a husband who, on the account of every friend she had, treated her like unpaid staff. She was 37 years old and she had been up that road half her life. On the afternoon of the 11th of February 2002, Kath Bergamin takes a rifle out of her husband's gun cabinet and tries to kill herself. I'm not going to go into detail here. It doesn't matter, and she deserves better than that from me. What matters is that it very nearly works, and that the only reason it does not is a matter of millimetres. Pure chance. 11 days later, she's transferred to a clinic in South Melbourne. The doctor who sends her there writes that this has come at the end of a month of a severe depression. She's been sleeping just 2 or 3 hours a night, and she talks constantly about worthlessness, about hopelessness. And at that clinic, she meets a psychiatrist named Dr. Mark Johnson. And Dr. Johnson sees her 23 times between February and the end of July. A psychiatrist's notes are not evidence of what happened, but they are evidence of what a patient said. Johnson knows this better than anybody when he's asked about Kath directly at the inquest. And his answer is that he formed the view that she was a consistent and credible historian, not a dramatic one, not an unreliable one, consistent. He went and spoke to other people in her life, and what they told him lined up with what she told him. And with that in mind, here is what Kath shared with Mark Johnson. She tells him that over the years, her husband has told her she'll never make it off that farm alive if she tries to leave. She tells him that he has pointed a firearm directly at her, not once, on at least 3 separate occasions, and she tells him that he has left bullets out where she will find them. As a reminder. Johnson also records something else. Her husband does not ring the hospital to ask about her. Not while she's at the Alfred, not while she's in South Melbourne, not once, until after she's been discharged. And Johnson notes what she says John told her about the whole business afterwards, that she had caused John a great deal of trouble, and that he was the one who saved her life. Kath's discharged from the clinic on the 17th of March, and she does not go back to Cheshunt. She goes, instead, to her mother's place at Wangaratta. 10 days later, Johnson sees her again, And she's doing better than anybody had any right to expect. No suicidal thoughts. She's genuinely surprised by how many people have rung her, how many friends have turned out to be there, and she tells him that she thinks it's 90% likely she'll separate from her husband. 90%. That is a woman with her mind very close to being made up. But then in early April, Kath Bergamin goes back to the farm. It's easy for us on the outside to comment on that, to make assumptions, to apportion blame. But the truth is that without being in Kath's shoes, we can never know what that decision looked like. What we do know is that her 3 children are still up the valley. Her home of 19 years is up at the valley, and she has no job yet. No income of her own, no qualification finished, and no house, except the one with his name on it. And according to those around her, she is still going to leave him, she's just not gone. And it's in that stretch of time, back on the farm, that a mate of hers, Helen, drives up for the weekend and walks down the road to catch up with her friend. What happens is the conversation you heard at the start of the episode. The glaring out of the kitchen window, the whispered question, Kath shaking her head and pointing at the door, and the pair of them walking out into open country because that was the only place that Kath was willing to talk openly. I would get half the farm, she said, but he has told me I would be leaving in a box first. 6 weeks later, on the evening of the 29th of May, Kath Bergamin does leave. She is gone. She leaves after an argument. She goes on foot, in the dark, in the last week of autumn, up a road with no streetlights on it. And she heads to the neighbour's place, which is the only thing that she can do. But it's also part of the problem, because the neighbours are the Primeranos. And the Primerano boy is one of John Bergamin's closest friends. Has been for years. She talks one of them into driving her towards Wangaratta anyway. But she doesn't make it the whole way to town. Part way down the valley, it gets decided, and the record is not clear by whom, that she'll get out at Whitfield instead. Whitfield isn't a complete escape. It's still in the valley. And she gets dropped at a house belonging to Philip and Margaret Bergamin. They're old friends of the Bergamin family. In fact, they once lived in a house on the property itself. It's about 9 o'clock at night when Kath knocks on their door, and she tells them John is chasing her. She tells them to call the police. And so Margaret Bergamin does ring the Whitfield station, and 15 minutes later, there's a knock at the door. But it's not the police. 15 minutes. That's how long it takes John to find her. In a valley with one direction she could have gone in, and only so many doors she could hide behind. John is out the front with their youngest, Dylan, beside him. He's agitated and demanding to speak to Kath, but the Brahmins, who can see the fear and panic in Kath's demeanour, refuse him, and so he begrudgingly leaves. Not long after he leaves, Senior Constable Harvey arrives at the property. And while he's talking to Kath, trying to determine exactly what's happening, the phone starts. John rings. More than once, each time trying to get Kathy to come to the phone, and each time she will not. And during one of those calls, she asks Margaret Bergamin to pass on a message for her, which is that she wants her car brought down so she can get to Wangaratta on her own. Pretty soon thereafter, it arrives. John drives it down himself, with the other Primerano son, Pat, following behind to run him home again. And after the two of them have gone, Philip Bergamin walks out to the car and finds the key snapped off in the ignition. Kath tells him there's $200 that she'd left in the car, and it's gone as well. Bergamin drives her into Wangaratta himself and she books into a motel. He gets home at about 1:45 in the morning. And a short time after that, there's another knock at his door. John Bergamin is back, very agitated now. He wants to know where Kath has gone, and he wants to know who she's been ringing. They ask him in, because that's what you do at 1 in the morning with a bloke you've known for 20 years, and the Bergamins put the kettle on and do everything they can to de-escalate the situation. And John sits there in their kitchen for half an hour. And at some point during that half an hour, on Philip Bergamin's evidence to the inquest, John Bergamin says that if he had wanted to get rid of Kath earlier, he had had plenty of possibilities to do exactly that. The next morning, Kath Bergamin walks into the Wangaratta court and applies for an interim intervention order, and she gets it. It's served on her husband the same day, and because there is an intervention order against him, police go out to the farm and take his guns. This is a development that he is not happy about. And meanwhile, Kath finally makes the final leap and rents a 2-bedroom place in Braithwaite Street, Wangaratta, and moves in the following morning. 4 days later, the order comes back before the court, and it is cancelled by agreement and replaced with a written undertaking about money. And I want you to hear why she agreed to that, because it is on the record from her own solicitor. She let that order go so he could have his firearms back. Think about what that means. Think about what a woman is weighing up when she decides that the safest available option is to hand back the thing that she is petrified of. Because the alternative is a man who is very angry about losing those guns. What does that say about the relevance and effectiveness of a system that ever forces a woman to make that decision? Wangaratta, winter 2002. And a story that focuses on everything horrible about Kath's life. Let's, just for a short while, focus on the difference in her as she begins to rebuild her life. She's off the Valley Road. She gets a job in town working with young people and adults with disabilities, which is what she's been studying for. She continues her course at Wodonga TAFE and lines up a first aid certificate to add to it. Renee and Dylan are in and out constantly, and in early August she moves again, out of Braithwaite Street and into a place in Bryan Crescent, on the corner opposite the West Primary School, and her dear friend Sandy Riley moves in with her. She goes to the pub, she plays pool, she sees a couple of blokes casually, nothing serious. She's 37 years old and single for the first time since she was 17, and she's entitled to be living her life in any way that she sees fit. But Wangaratta is not a big place. 3 pubs on the main street, all within a couple of 100 metres of each other. And that turns out to be the catch, because the ever-present eyes of the valley have the ability to see well beyond it. Sandy Riley's evidence is that they would go out trying to relax, and if anybody spoke to Kath, John would be right behind them, just standing there, watching. Another witness describes dancing with her at the Albion pub until 5 in the morning, while John's mates stood around the edge of the dance floor, and every one of them was getting phone calls from him asking where she was, and he himself was waiting outside, coming into the pub from time to have a look and see what was going on. There is one detail from the record that tells you all you need to know, and it's about a bar called The Jag. Kath liked The Jag. She told a friend she felt safe there, not because of the security, but because the local coppers drank at the bar. That is a story that tells you that this woman is doing proactive threat assessments every time she decides to go for a night out in her own town. And it's not just when she's out that she struggles to get away. He gets hold of her silent number. Sandy Riley's evidence is that he rings her 20 times a day, minimum. When the intervention order comes in, he is allowed to contact her about the children. And so every call, on the face at least, is about the children. He gets the kids to ring instead sometimes, and then the kids press their mother to talk to their father. He even helps them move house in August, which sounds decent until you hear the rest of it, because during that move, he takes her address book. It's returned to her a while later, with the Melbourne addresses and contact details of her birth family removed from it. Her things start to go missing around the house too. Not Sandy's things, just Kath's. Underwear off the clothesline, and then days later the same items turn up again, sometimes under a bed, inside the house. And then there's an incident in early July with a woman named Christina Strang. Strang's not from Wangaratta. She's a TAFE student living over at Wodonga with her partner, and one night her partner doesn't come home when he should, and she works out he's probably at Kath Bergamin's place. So she gets a number out of a TAFE phone directory and rings it. It happens to be Kath's old number, and the man who answers, of course, is John Bergamin. He tells Christina that Kath's moved out and he won't give the phone number over, but he'll do better than that. He'll show Christina exactly where Kath lives. And so they arrange to meet in town outside the National Australia Bank, and he gets into Christina Strang's car and gives her directions to Braithwaite Street. And when they get near it, at about 10 at night, he tells her not to park under the streetlight. He tells her to pull up under a tree in the shadows. Christina thinks this is quite odd. She only wants to talk to her bloke. John gets out. He walks around the house, having a look, and comes back to the car. And then he tells her what he wants her to do. Knock on the door, get Kath to come outside and smash her head into the bonnet. He says she needs some treatment to knock a bit of sense into her. Christina Strang, of course, refuses. She does knock on the door though, and Kath lets her in. She has a row with her partner, and she's asked eventually to leave, which she does. About a week later, John Bergamin contacts her again with some further accusations about Kath, and she does not believe a word of it. And that is the end of her involvement in this bizarre chapter of Kath and John. That is a man asking a stranger to assault his wife on her own doorstep. That is in the coroner's findings. That same month he turns up at the workplace of a man named Robin Seymour, who's been seeing Kath, to warn him off. He brings a mate along with him, and while the two of them are there, they buy a roll of Nitto brand silver duct tape. On the 16th of July, Kath takes out a second interim intervention order. On the 12th of August, she's back at the Wangaratta court to get it extended, so a contested hearing can be set down for October. Her solicitor, Elizabeth Stagg, arrives that morning and finds her client sitting on the steps outside the clerk's office, wailing. Her husband is standing over her. So is a tall, slim, dark-haired young man. And Kath is saying the same sentence over and over. He's turning the children against me. He is turning the children against me. Stagg suggests that the two men leave, and they do. 3 days later, on the 15th of August, Stagg posts a letter down to John Bergamin's solicitors in Collins Street. It says she is acting for Kath Bergamin, and it says her client is after a property settlement and spousal maintenance. Half the farm, in writing, on a solicitor's letterhead in the post. It gets date stamped as received on Saturday, the 17th of August. Kath Bergamin disappeared on the evening of Sunday the 18th of August 2002 from her home in Bryan Crescent, Wangaratta in northeast Victoria. In part 2, which is called A Clear Night, Moderately Well Lit, we go through that Sunday hour by hour to try to determine exactly what happened to Kath in the hours leading up to her disappearance. When she was last seen, she was wearing 3 quarter-length red Adidas track pants with white stripes, a white Tommy Girl t-shirt with a red and blue logo, a red hooded windsheeter style jacket, and red Nike socks. Her remains have never been found. There is a $1 million reward on offer for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person or persons responsible for a death. In an appropriate case, the Director of Public Prosecutions may also consider granting indemnity from prosecution to someone who provides information identifying the principal offender. And so if you know anything at all about the disappearance of Kath Bergamin, please call Crime Stoppers 1800 333 000. That's all from me today. I'll catch you on Friday with part 2. You've been listening to Struth. Cheers.